You go ahead. Or yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our session. So we are from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Department of Parks and Recreation, and Prince George's County, Maryland. So you know where we are, so tell us where you are. Put it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I am now going to pass it over to Kristen Monteperto, who is our moderator today. Kristen?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with introducing the four of us, and then I will go into a little bit of an introduction to give you guys a background as to what we are going to be talking about today. And after I am done with that, we are then going to open it up to the panelists, have a Q&A, and then also invite everybody in the audience to also participate in this. So to start off, as Stephanie said, my name is Kristen Monteperto. I will be the moderator today. I am the Chief Archaeologist for the Department of Parks and Recreation in Prince George's County, Maryland. As Steph said, our organization is a mouthful. We are with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And joining us today for our panel, we have Stephanie Sperling, who is the Senior Archaeologist for the Department of Parks and Recreation. We have Omar Eaton Martinez, who is our Assistant Division Chief for Historic Resources. And then we have Mary Jerkowitz. I am so sorry I just screwed that up, Mary. I've known you forever. And she is the Museum Manager for Montpelier Historic Site, which is located here in Prince George's County in Laurel, Maryland. So to start off with, we are part of a very large organization, and I'm noticing my slides are not advancing, so let me fix that real fast.
That's okay. Kristen, are you ready to start the presentation?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me pull up the presentation.
Oh. Let me know when it's pulled up.
Okay, you are up and you're on the first slide. Go ahead. You're on the cover slide.
Okay, so we will advance since we've already done our introductions, and hopefully Stephanie, is all that advancing correctly?
Looks perfect. You're on the second slide.
Fantastic. Okay, so to put everybody in perspective as to where we are, I'm going to abbreviate our organization. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, it's just the M-NCPPC. We are a bi-county agency, and hopefully people can see my cursor here in a moment, which is composed of Montgomery counties and Prince George's counties. And we are on either side of Washington, D.C. So again, the county in which we work is here, Prince George's County. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of our facts about the department. We are on the Department of Parks and Recreation side. We are a very large entity. You can see we have hundreds of playgrounds, hundreds of parks, athletic fields, tennis courts, tons and tons of miles of trails. We have waterfront parks. You know, the list goes on and on. And one of the things that can occur within an agency this large is with this huge focus on the recreation side, that history side can sometimes get lost. And we sort of have to remind ourselves and our agency that we do have a lot of historic resources on our properties. Currently, our parkland in Prince George's County is approximately 30,000 acres. And on that parkland alone in the county, we have hundreds of archaeological sites. I believe now we're over 200, and that's only on parkland. So outside of that, in Prince George's County, there are even hundreds more. We also have a number of historic sites. Currently, our number is around 50 historic sites. However, what should be noted with those historic sites is those are going to be sites that actually fall under potential permitting or review under federal, state, and at the local level, cultural resource law and regulatory compliance and things like that. So the number of our historic properties or sites are actually much larger than that. But again, it's that around 50 that actually are subject to some of that review. So within Parks and Recreation, I'm going to go down a little bit narrower, and the four of us all work within Natural and Historical Resources Division. And this is composed of a lot of nature sites. As I mentioned, we have a waterfront park. We have many historic sites. We have archaeological sites, and then also we have a dinosaur park, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner. To narrow down even more, which is going to go basically into the main part of what we're going to be discussing today, does fall under the Archaeology Office. So Stephanie and I work for the Archaeology Office. And within that, we do wear a lot of hats. We like to break it down as 4 primary roles that we have, and those consist of collections, any archaeological site that is excavated, and I should say the majority of the archaeological sites excavated on parkland, those do get stored in our office. So we have a collections responsibility. We have a compliance responsibility to assist our organization with review that could occur at the federal, state, or local levels. We manage 4 sites within our office. And then finally, a large component is conducting public outreach and education. And this slide is showing us some of those outreach programs and education things that we do, where we'll do hands-on activities. We'll have volunteers come in. We will have education groups, school groups come in, and we do activities with them. And through all of this, we are helping to bring things to the public and have the public bring things to us to help build these histories and show the importance of archaeology with uncovering these narratives, these stories of people that, have not been told. And one thing I do want to point out, we do have a very large Juneteenth event that we've been doing within our organization for many, many years, in fact, decades. And at this, we do set up, different activities and information related to various themes around our African American sites, the archaeology we're doing, and things like that. One of my favorite things that I like to do is again related to public outreach and education. And descendants from the very beginning of the formation of our office have played a major role in building those histories and building those connections with communities. One of the first sites that we did acquire in the late 80s when our office began is the Northampton Slave Quarters and Archaeological Park. And the key focus of that was working with the descendant community. The African American descendants associate themselves with Elizabeth Hawkins, who you can see pictured on the far left. And these other images on the right are of family members. And they played a key role in educating and pulling research and finding out more about their family history, sharing it with us, and a lot of collaboration going back and forth with, excavation, teaching at schools and things like that. Building upon that collaboration, again, we do a lot of community collaboration. And through archaeology, that provides that tangible to history for the public. And it is a great way to help bring interest and show people what it is that we're finding, uncovering, to help build the histories and the stories within the county. And these are some examples of some of the different programs that we've done. So let's go to the formation of our Echoes of the Enslaved program. One of our archaeological parks that we manage is Mount Calvert Historical and Archaeological Park, which is right in the center. You can see that it's located on a bluff with water around us. And this is a location where we have at least 10,000 years of human occupation. So as archaeologists, we want to tell that complete story, where inside the museum, our archaeology museum, which is in the historic house in the middle, On that ground floor is where we tell this history, and we tell this history of these thousands of years of people living on the property that go as far back as Native American Indians living there. This was the location of the first county seat for Prince George's. And so we do have Europeans that settled here and created that town. And then a final period of time that we discuss is the plantation period. And that's going to wrap into our Echoes in the Enslaved programming. So what we did, and you can see the red circle on the right-hand side, this is again a view of Mount Calvert, the original plantation house that dates to about 1780, 1790s. Our research focus over the last couple of years has been to help uncover the lives of those enslaved on the property. And so you can see over here in sort of the blue dotted circle, this is an area where we have been uncovering evidence of where those quarters would have been. So far, we've identified potentially 2 quarter houses, maybe the location of an overseer's house. And this became the focus of where we wanted to start our Echoes of the Enslaved program, where we reached out to Slave Dwelling Project and Joe to collaborate with us on this and have this held at this important location. So year one was 2019. Joe did not potentially realize what he was getting into. We are a very ambitious group of people, and he put us to task to fill his schedule, and we did that. We'll go more into detail on this, but we did basically a 4-event 2-day series with Joe. And at this, again, this was at Mount Calvert. The primary focus was there, where we had our conversation circles. So much interest, we actually had to create 4 fire circles, and Joe circulated to each of those. A overnight camp out then preceded that. The next day, we held a community archaeology day for those who camped. Others were invited to come and participate and excavate on, in the area where the enslaved once lived. And then we wrap that up also on day 2 with a panel discussion. So again, very, very ambitious, but Joe wanted to come back. So we took that challenge. But this time we were trying to figure out, are we going to still do this at Mount Calvert, or are we going to change locations? And so we did poll people internally and externally, those who had attended. And what we decided to do is to host it at another location, our Montpelier historic site. And we did also 2 days. First night was a legacy of enslavement. The second night was a legacy of colonization. COVID occurred. So in our early planning stages, COVID was not, quote, a thing yet. But everything had a pivot. Everything that was going to be, people attending had a switch. This became a complete virtual event. We had to bring a production company in to help us live stream. So we did not let the pandemic stop us from continuing with this important programming. And as I mentioned, we had 2 nights, Legacy of Enslavement the first night. The second night, we expanded this conversation and included an elder from the Piscataway Nation to join the conversation about colonization and sort of expand that related to the first peoples in the area. The last year we did it, which is this year, we've been holding this event in September. We held it at Marietta House Museum. And so we just wrapped that up a couple of weeks ago. Again, 2 days of events. This time we started with a panel discussion with audience participation. It was a hybrid event, so we were able to have some in person, but could not host all the people that wanted to attend, so did live stream that. We ended the day with conversation circles and then a camp out. In the morning, we began with a performance by Jubilee Voices, who does narrative and singing to start that day. And then we ended with a community archaeology event. I do want to say that our event fell on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So we thought it important to bring in yet another voice into this conversation, the Muslim community. And so we did have a representative on our panel that first day to help bring that conversation to the forefront and be part of it. So to end my piece, we are still continuing. We want to continue Echoes of the Enslaved. It has been a great collaborative effort with Joe, with our organization, with different museum managers and their sites. Joe said he's willing for year 4. So we're going to keep continuing as long as everybody's willing to do this. And so basically now what I'm going to do is stop sharing this, Stephanie, and see if we can bring everybody back up.
We're all here.
Okay, fantastic. So what I want to do now is we're going to open up this conversation a little bit more and get more into the creation of what we did, why we're doing it, why we thought this was important, and the different voices that we've been continuously bringing into this conversation. So again, just to remind anybody who may have started a little bit later, I want to reintroduce all of ourselves. I, again, am Kristen Monteperto, the Chief Archaeologist for, here we go, we're all titled today, Department of Parks and Recreation in Prince George's County, Maryland, which borders Washington, D.C. We are part of that metro area for D.C. Joining us is Stephanie Sperling, who is one of our panelists. She is Senior Archaeologist. The two of us work together. Also part of our division, we have Omar Eaton Martinez joining us today, and he is the Assistant Division Chief for Historic Resources. And then we have Mary Jerkowitz, and she is one of our fantastic museum managers, and she is over Montpelier Historic Site, which is in Laurel, Maryland, so not to be confused with James Madison's Montpelier. Again, we're all in Maryland and Prince George's County. So I'm going to go around and ask some questions to the panel. Please also, the audience that's participating, please add questions in the chat. We can, add these to our conversations. We want to have an open conversation about this. But the first thing I want to start with is Stephanie. So Stephanie is the person that basically brought this, to my office, to Omar's office. Is like, hey, I got this idea. And definitely we were all in 100% support of this. But Stephanie, can you give us sort of the origin story of why you thought this was important to do and bring to our department and bring to the bigger community?
Thanks, Kristen. And hi, Joe. See, he's put something in the chat. Good to see you. So yeah, this all started back in 2018 when I was leading a hike. We do a lot of public archaeology and outreach, as Kristen alluded to, and that it's not only just excavation, but we lead hikes and kayak tours. We go to different sites. We go to events. And so I was leading a history hike, and Linda Davis from Coming to the Table happened to be on there. She's worked closely with Joe over the years. And we got to talking, and she said, do you have any standing slave quarters on any of your sites over in Prince George's County, on your historic sites? And I said, well, no, we don't have any standing quarters. But of course, all of the houses that were constructed before the Civil War, and there were large enslaved populations there. And she said, well, and I said, and in fact, we're excavating the slave quarters area, or the area where quarters once stood at Mount Calvert. And I had just started, and I was, tasked with leading this excavation. And so Linda said, well, I'm going to put you in touch with Joe on the slave building project. And Joe's been working with archaeologists more recently, and let's see if he might be interested in coming to Prince George's County. And so we started talking, simultaneously. Omar had started, he and I started within just a few months of one another. As I started to talk to Joe, and then I brought it to Kristen and Omar said, I have been a long admirer of Joe Miguel. And when I first started, bringing him to our organization was one of the things I wanted to do. So yeah, we started off with just, having a real archaeology focus. That year, as I said, we do a lot of public archaeology in our organization. Personally, I've been a public archaeologist for, many, many years. And the work that I have done broadly at Mount Calvert, digging the slave quarters I think Kristen mentioned, Prince George's is one of the wealthiest majority Black counties in the country. So, most of the people that come out to our digs are African Americans. So, starting the conversations with folks about, the legacies of slavery in such a tangible way, this tangible way that archaeology provides us to interact with history, is always very moving and very powerful. But never more so than at the first echoes of the enslaved, because, we had these conversation circles. We had, 100 people sitting around these fires, talking about the legacies of slavery. And then many of us camped in the fields there where the enslaved individuals lived and worked. And, the next day, then we all woke up and, went out and excavated. And, the great thing about digging at a place like Mount Calvert, we're in the plow zone. It's the top 12 inches or so of soil. So anybody can get out there and dig. You can be 5 years old, you can be 80 years old. It doesn't matter. You're not going to hurt it. You go out there and you dig and you sift for artifacts. And, and finding these things that the enslaved people left behind, their buttons from their clothes, fragments of dishes, that they ate off of. It really brought it to life in a wonderful way.
Thank you, Stephanie. And one of the things that I know, Stephanie and I had talked about, and we talked about this with Omar and with Joe as we were going through this, sort of the importance of archaeology and how that can help tell the story. These various different narratives and stuff that have been ignored, these are things that are not visible, right? And through archaeology, we can give that tangible experience and we can help bring this stuff to the public. And it's just so, it's amazing to see people's faces when they're touching the past, no matter how old, that might be. And I do have to, again, do my archaeology plug, as Steph would probably do too, is I appreciate the acknowledgement during these last 2 days of showing how archaeology can help bring that tangible and help uncover these stories. As an archaeologist, that just makes me so happy to hear the important role that we can play in telling these stories. Omar, Stephanie came to us with this idea and, to collaborate with the Slave Dwelling Project with Joe. And she mentioned how, this was a vision that you had. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on the creation of this, your vision, and, collaborations moving forward as we go through the years, our first 3 years, and then hopefully 3+ more, indefinitely. So, Omar?
Well, thank you, Kristen. I just have to say, my 3.5 years here has been, as assistant division chief, has been very eventful. And one of the things that I really was able to learn a lot is what Kristen just talked about, is the deep connection to public archaeology and historic interpretation. I've had opportunities in the past to kind of look as an outsider in and see some of that work, but to really be able to work with Kristen and Stephanie and the archaeology unit and see the impactful work that they've done on the interpretation has really been inspiring. Like what was shared, I got to meet Joe finally February of 2018. I was one of the privileged group that was invited to come to the James Madison Montpelier Summit on the teaching of slavery, where we created a rubric on how do you interpret slavery through the engagement of descendant communities. And I got to experience a conversation circle in February in the Code in Orange, Virginia. And it was incredible. It was an incredible experience to see how connected everyone was around these issues. Certainly, there were people that maybe expressed some level of uncomfortability, but I think after a while, once we got through the conversation circle, people were really dialed in, and just in that moment, Joe was able to create this incredible sense of connected community. And so once I, fast forward, and once I knew I was going to come over to the Department of Parks and Recreation in Prince George's County and do this work that I'm doing now, I was definitely thinking about how can we connect with Joe McGill and the Slave Dwelling Project and bring them to our sites. And so it was just synergy and serendipity that obviously Stephanie Sperling had the same idea, and she was fully engaged and locked in. And so we had a great conversation about doing this. But one of the things that I was really focused on was definitely making this an annual event, that this was not going to be a checkoff for our program, that we wanted to really bring Joe back again and again and again and try to bring him back in different spaces, but also, as what Kristen already talked about, was bringing in new conversations that are connected to the legacies of enslavement. And so we have several historic house museums and different archaeological parks that have connections to this history. And so we have plenty of opportunity to bring Joe back many more times. We also have our good cousins in Montgomery County, which is also part of the larger Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission, which we are part of, that are also very interested in Joe. So I know our good colleague and friend Marlena, who we've gotten to know over this slave dwelling project, and I know we were part of an earlier session together. We traded some messages. She was asking about the scope of the commission, and so it's Prince George's County as well as Montgomery County, which are the two counties that border Washington D.C. on the Maryland side of things. And so they have like the Josiah Henson Museum and Park, which just opened early this year. They have the Oakley Slave Cabin. They have the Woodley Park. So they have a couple of sites themselves. And I know my good partner in crime, Cheryl Spicer, would love to see Joe McGill come over there as well. But the idea of bringing Joe and these conversations to our sites is really part and parcel of creating a much more inclusive and immersive space around these really deeply profound conversations that the conversation circles provide, but also just being able to have Joe walk around some of our buildings. And I remember last year, or maybe even last year when we were at Montpelier House Museum, it was the first time that I saw Joe. He may have done this in Mount Calvary, but I don't recall, where he was looking for the fingerprints in the bricks. And I can't tell you how impactful just that exercise was. And it wasn't part of our program, but it was part of his experience with us doing the Echoes of the Enslaved. And since then, like, he's done it every time, and now he has all of our staff doing it in our house museum, looking for these fingerprints, which are really such a powerful marker to acknowledge the labor and the blood, sweat, and tears that our ancestors who are part of these sites participated in the construction of these houses, which we have been celebrating for a long time, but not necessarily explicitly acknowledging their contribution to those houses and their experiences that were obviously very traumatic over the years in the county. And so I think it's really powerful for us to be able to bring Joe and bring others around to have these conversations. And I love the way that we've been able to evolve it to the legacies of colonization, to this year's conversation around the 20th commemoration of 9/11. We had a great partner, Andy Shalal, who's the founder and CEO of Busboys and Poets, being able to tell his experience as a Muslim American prior or just after 9/11 happening. And these things are all interconnected, because what we're really talking about is how do we survive, rebuke, and change the white supremacist construct that we've all have had to live through since the beginning of this country, or even before this country was a country when it was still an aggregate of colonies. And so I think it's been a great effort for us to kind of dismantle those things through these conversations and really prick people in a profound way to inform their conscience and do better in the future.
Thank you, Omar, for sharing that with everybody. And Mary, you are not forgotten. we are coming to you. You are second year. Omar touched on a lot of really important points to this program, this Echoes of the Enslaved program, where we're trying to bring these narratives to a greater audience, both internally and externally. So one of the things I'd like to circle back to is, we had this first event, and I know, and speaking for myself, and I know Stephanie and I went back and forth, we were exhausted after that first event, because Joe put us to that challenge, packed my schedule, and we were exhausted, right? So it took us a little bit of time to, debrief, calm down, reset. But within our organization, it's like right away, we got a plan for the next one. Because these are like a year out when we do something this large, planning for it. So looking at year one and year two, and let's right now this is going to sound horrible, take the pandemic out of it, because when we first started these conversations about where do we want to go year two, the pandemic was not part of that factor yet. So to Stephanie and to Omar, if you guys, and Stephanie, I'll start with you, if you can talk about maybe some lessons learned, and some things that we were discussing as to what we want to do the next year, hoping that some of these conversations we're having right now can help, with those participating, figuring out how they need to adjust, what's too much, what's not, different things like that. So Stephanie, if you can start with lessons learned and how we wanted to move forward the next year in 2020 when we moved to Montpelier.
Well, one thing that I have to say sort of floored me was the level of interest that we had in this program. Speaking before I came here to the commission, I worked for a nonprofit, and I contracted with various nonprofits, and so it was sort of like just a party of one at that point. And now here in the commission, we are a massive, hulking bureaucracy, with thousands of people. And as Kristen said at the top of her presentation, with community centers and aquatics facilities and nature centers. And, it was, I wondered when I first started here, where does an archaeologist fit into all of this? And how does history fit into all of this? And I feel like sometimes our park system, we have a real emphasis on, the revenue generation, as we absolutely, as we should. And history and archaeology are not bringing in the big bucks. Let me tell you. And on top of that, Echoes of the Enslaved is free. It's always been completely free. So after that program, that's where I saw where it fits. And, we had people who, said to us, thank you, Prince George's Parks, for having programming like this. But the problem was it got a little bit too out of hand, when we have Joe McGill, one man trying to run 4 conversation circles. He didn't get to everyone. And so we had to sort of check our expectations somewhat. And so we tried to do that. Our initial planning for Echoes of the Enslaved, at Mary's site at Montpelier, I think we had talked about limiting how many people were coming. We were going to have a ticketing system. We were going to have 2 nights, 2 conversation circle nights. You know, and then ultimately it sort of worked out, I suppose, because we did it all virtual. So even though it was just 2 people sitting across a fire talking to one another being live streamed, you know, we were able to engage with, I think Mary, we just saw our engagement the other day. I mean, it was thousands and thousands of people that we engaged with. And those videos are still live on YouTube. So I think that for me, that was, we had to figure out, you know, how to balance this sort of hunger and thirst for this knowledge, for these conversations, with like realistically, like making it a good experience for everybody.
Thank you, Stephanie. Omar, did you have anything you wanted to add to that before I move to Mary?
Yeah, number one, I just want to let Mary know I'm going to allow you to share those stats because those stats are incredible, and I think you should share them, Mary. But lessons learned for me was we leaned in, I think, in a wonderful way that first year at Mount Calvert with partnering with an organization like Outdoor Afro, right? And for those who don't know Outdoor Afro, I believe they do have chapters sort of sparsely across the United States. I know that the chapter in near our region is pretty active. They originated in San Francisco, but it's a bunch of people of color, mostly of African descent, who go out and do outdoor activities, and but usually are connected with some type of cultural heritage as well. So they connect culture and nature a lot in the types of events that they promote. And so I had known them from back in my National Park Service days, and so we connected with them and we let them know, and they were super excited. And so when they had the opportunity to connect to the part of the program that included an overnight stay, then we won big time, because I don't think, number one, percentage wise or even raw number wise, that Joe McGill has ever seen that many people of color at his event. Certainly not that many people staying overnight either. And we just hooked up with the perfect group. And I think there's a lot of groups like that. I know there's a Latino outdoors group as well that's national in scope that can probably provide the same type of partnership for those who are seeking to do this type of work with Joe and other like-minded institutions in the future. I think the other thing that I didn't get to talk about in the first round was, you know, at the beginning when I first got here, I had a bit of a struggle with a lot of our programs getting videoed and streamed, and we just didn't have the same capacity that we do now as a result of COVID that we did when I first got there. And of course, I was still learning sort of the commission ropes. There's different sets of red tape to kind of go through for that type of programming in our agency. And we had a great panel that first year. I thought was pretty good anyway. With Joe moderating it, we had a Legacies of Enslavement panel where we had all these different scholars. We had Kristen representing anthropology and archaeology. We had Kay Wright Lewis from Howard, who was an historian. We had Jason from University of Maryland, Jason Nichols, who was a political science and an African American studies lecturer at College Park. We had Rashawn Ray, who is another one who you'll see on television a lot. He's a sociologist. So we had all these different people coming in with these disciplines talking about the legacy of enslavement, and it's just a shame that we did not capture it. We didn't video record it, and we certainly didn't stream it. And so I thought that was a great lesson learned for us. And so fast forward 2020, when we had to do it all virtual, it was like what Kristen and Stephanie shared. It was great that we've been able to capture the conversation between Marvin Alonzo Greer, our new lead historic interpretation and community engagement officer, and Joe McGill the first night. And then certainly it was excellent that we captured Joe McGill and Rico Newman speaking to one another. And of course, this year in 2021, at the Marietta House Museum, we were able to capture the opening plenary panel with Will Thomas and Dennis Smith and Andy Shalal and Joe McGill, and we just got into all kinds of incredible stories, and we also got great questions from the people that were in person as well as the people who were visiting us virtually. And so for me, the lesson learned was to continue to partner with community-based organizations to uplift them and create a very diverse audience, but also to really lean into the technologies that allow for these types of stories and programs to really go beyond our typical borders.
Thank you, Omar. And I also want to thank Joe. He is putting in the chat links to these recordings. So if anybody wants to follow up and see what we had done this year and last year, definitely follow those links. Mary, so now we're on year 2. We came to Montpelier for year 2. And I know that you approached us with an interest in having us host this at your location, hold this at your location. And I know there was a lot of planning going on initially before the pandemic, changed how we needed to reformat this. And I know one of the important initiatives that you guys were doing, you and your staff were doing in Montpelier, was changing those narratives and telling these different stories. So if you could talk about why Montpelier, what was important to you and to the site for having it there, and sort of that changing of the narrative that you guys were doing.
Hi everybody. Hopefully I can deliver just like my colleagues have. Well, I think what was key to us, and you guys have alluded to this, is how we kind of sort of at historic sites, we kind of get lost in the shuffle within the department. So after seeing the amazing success of Echoes of the Enslaved at Mount Calvert, I thought, my goodness, this is a key program to open up eyes within the organization and without. So I jumped at the opportunity. I don't know if you guys remember Kristen and Stephanie. I grabbed Holly and we went down there when you were doing some digging in the summer. And I started to say, hey guys, could we do this at Montpelier? I was really looking forward to hopefully being able to do a little bit of archaeology and having the fire circles. And then, hello, here comes COVID, right? But the way that I see Echoes of the Enslaved, to tell you the truth, is that although my staff and I, we have been including archival information available to us, such as inventories that list the 141 enslaved individuals that lived and worked here at Montpelier, runaway ads, among others. We really we felt that we needed a program that would begin the discussion of the long-term harm, trauma of slavery, because you can put all this up on a wall, you can share it in many different types of programs, but what happens afterwards, right? And also, I was also, like I said, concerned that within our organization, how do we show that we really can make a difference? And I thought that this was a way that we could make a difference. Beginning that discussion, what was I hoping it was going to be, a way to also regain trust with the community, with the African American community, because for many, many years, as Omar mentioned, I think we were not seen or doing the right work that we should be doing. And so I also saw Echoes of the Enslaved as a way to reach out to that community, and to say we want to walk the talk, not just say that we're doing it, but also showing it to you and bringing you in, and that was key. So I see Echoes of the Enslaved in partnership with the Slave Dwelling Part as a gateway to begin the process. And I think we've mentioned this, is that many of our historic sites, we do not have outbuildings left. All of that, as development has happened, as the land has been sold, that has been erased. So, you know, archaeology is kind of a way of bringing that and making it tangible. Because many times when somebody doesn't see the building or say put in the history in that building, it's kind of hard to say your ancestors were here. So I think that archaeology does that. And the conversation circles is a great way of, how do you say it? I'm bagging, kind of like all the problems that that slavery has brought to this nation. And the main thing that I want to bring out is that the first encounter that a visitor has at Montpelier is this beautiful landscape, you know, with a mansion. And so there is no tangibility as to, I know that some of you probably were in the talk about Sotterley and how Sotterley has the slave quarters still there and a number of outbuildings. You come to Montpelier and there's nothing that says to that. So we have to do it through programming, really, in order to tell that story. So I saw Echoes of the Enslaved again as a necessary program to kind of peel back the veneer, so to speak, and reveal the truth that the beauty that one sees is due to the exploitation and the suffering of the enslaved ancestors that lived here. So that, I think the program was key. Of course, we had to do a lot of rethinking of how the program was going to be brought forth. So I guess a little bit of the silver lining, I think, with COVID is that we had to think out. We had to think outside the house, so to speak, outside of the model. And also, I think it also brought the opportunity to work with other teams also that otherwise we wouldn't have perhaps worked with, like the public affairs and marketing division coming to us and work with us, giving us the support that we needed for the social media and so forth. And I think we all learned a lot through the process, also how to do new things. And I just last week, we reached out to one of our colleagues, Greg Wallace, who is our assistant with social media. And she has also been key to this project. And she shared the statistics with us from the program. And I think I just sent them to you guys. And it kind of blew me away as to what impact it had. And I'm opening it up right now so I can tell you a little bit of the numbers. But we were able to reach around close to 12,000 people from through Echoes of the Enslaved. That is just amazing. So that while people were also online, they were able to ask questions and participate that way. It's just amazing. As a total, this blows me away. We were able to reach, because we also did a little bit of a dance the week leading to the program. We were doing posts, doing via Facebook, through our history page. In about 114,000 people were reached. It's like, whoa. And the engagement, the people that engage either with those posts or the day of the streaming, the two nights of streaming live, there was about 4,976 people that were reached. That to me is the capacity of reaching out to that many people and letting them know that here you can come to historic house in Prince George's County now and into the future, and we are now telling you the history of the enslaved that we had not done before. I think that is huge progress for us.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate you sharing that. And I do not know if what Omar just posted is visible to everybody else. This might just be internal to us, but he did mention that in 2020, just to piggyback on what Mary was saying about the numbers, is let's see, the 2020 stats on social media, on our history Facebook page for day one when we did the legacies of enslavement. That, oh, thank you, Stephanie. There you go. I'm going to stop talking then. So there are the stats for day one and day two, which, as Mary said, was amazing. So one of the things that, you know, is a prevalent theme among all of us that are programmers and, you know, do these things, is everything had a shift when we were all hit with the pandemic. As mentioned earlier, you know, planning for this stuff happens at least a year in advance. So in 2019, the end of 2019 is when we were planning for 2020, which was hosted at Mary's site, Montpelier. So again, at the beginning, everything's in person. We're doing conversation circles. We're having campouts. We're doing all of these different things. And the pandemic hits our organization. And, you know, those of you that are joining us from the United States, most of us shut down on, you know, Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2020. And we're told don't go back to your offices until we know what's going on, right? So with that, we all have to rethink, how are we doing this? What are we doing? And one of the advantages that is harder for smaller sites is that we are part of this large entity. So we do have a public affairs and marketing division that can assist us. And they help tremendously with getting an amazing production company in to help us keep this conversation going and not stop it, even though the pandemic was trying to stop a lot of stuff. We're not letting this stop. Mary and Stephanie, if you guys can sort of talk about that shift that we had to take with the pandemic and COVID. And I know one of the interesting things that we did in 2020 is you guys created a video that sort of preceded when we started having these conversations. So if Mary, if you want to start with where that thought of doing a video as a promotion and then leading into sort of how the format changed due to COVID.
Okay. Well, it was a team effort, guys, wasn't it? I think that in our team we had about it's about 9 or 10 of us from our different from our different aspects, and I think that we all brainstorm. We definitely all brainstorm on how we were going to reformat this. And the key was that we know, okay, people cannot come and take a tour of the site in advance of the program or during the program, because that was part of the plan too. We were also trying to develop a virtual reality tour that we were going to try to test as part of the program, and so that had to be put to the side because we could no longer meet with our advisory committee. We could no longer meet as a staff to continue to edit the drafts that we were writing for the actors, and so all of that had to be put to the side, and then we had to figure out, okay, how do we give folks a tour of the house in advance of Echoes of the Enslaved live stream, so they can kind of get an idea of the site and talk about the history of the enslaved as we have it. So I think we, once again, working with videography team, internal videography team, we did it ended up being, I think, a 10 to 15 minute tour indoors, in which Stephanie, Marvin Alonso, another one of our team members, and myself, we did it kind of like a conversation. It wasn't so much like, here I am on the tour guide and I'm going to tell you. We did it more interactively, in which we would ask each other questions, and then we would give the tour through the house. And that was posted, I think, the Thursday before the Friday evening talk, or I should say fire circle between between Marvin Alonso and Joe McGill. So I think that also gave a reference to folks to see why we were having this conversation circle also virtually. Steph, am I on the right track here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, one of the best things about that is that it has legs. And
absolutely.
And that goes beyond just echoes of the enslaved. Now you have this like promotional material that could be segmented down. You could get lots of sound bites out of that if you wanted for like, short social media posts. You can show the entire thing. I mean, right. It goes beyond just this one event.
Correct. And the other thing is that also we didn't think about also who we're reaching, because most of our historic sites, and probably our audience too, folks with disabilities that may not be able to walk into our sites because of steps and so forth. And these are things we didn't think about. So now there is a tour that folks can take virtually. It is shorter than if they were to come on site, but now they can also visit the site virtually.
Well, absolutely. And also, we went into the attic.
Yes, we showed the attics.
I think we were in the basement.
We don't show, and we also showed the basement. And I think we also, included part of the grounds as to the spaces that we would have otherwise thought about including on a tour. And also acknowledging and talking about, which Stephanie, you did, the indigenous habitation and who really was there first on what Montpelier, the Montpelier grounds is at now.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. And you guys have already touched on some of the positives, and I always hate to use the word positives in association with our pandemic, but it forced all of us to move to this virtual platform because right, we could not be in each other's presence, and things were evolving over time. So how
I just wanted to add really quickly is that everything we did was done outdoors that day. So we lucked out with the weather in that we were able to live stream outside at night, and we all were wearing masks. We were all like trying to make sure we were keeping the 6 feet apart at that time. So we got it done, but it was just, to me, amazing how, like you said earlier, COVID did not stop us from continuing the program and the discussion, and in how relevant it was also at the time that we're dealing with this pandemic that is impacting African American community more, is impacting the indigenous community more, is impacting the Latino community more. And here we are talking about, this, where it all started, and here we are, and we're still facing these issues. And I think that also was so apropos to the time.
Did anybody else want to add on to that? No? Okay. So
perfectly.
So Omar, I know, just to sort of touch back on, moving to this virtual platform, you mentioned at the beginning, year one, we didn't record any of this stuff. Everything was in person, in the moment. That was it. Pandemic hit. All of a sudden, all these initiatives were, you have to move to a virtual platform. You have to produce X, Y, and Z. You can't do this in person. So at the beginning, it was a rough start, and I imagine a rough start for most of us that are joining us today. It was extremely hard, right? And we had to learn this technology. We had to get into this groove. So how did, moving to this different format and having to do all of this virtually, where the first year it was all live, how did this sort of help us and move forward with what we ended up doing this year with a hybrid version? So what do you guys see as the challenges, the successes with sort of these changing formats? Omar, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think it gave us the confidence that we needed to move forward with this type of format. Again, we had a lot of trepidation trying to do this work at the beginning pre-COVID. There was a lot of, well, we haven't done this and we don't have that. And so, but when our backs are against the wall, we stepped up. It's just like, the old adage, when something's happened, when there's a gap, you stand in the gap. And we stood in it. And I think that in standing in the gap, it provoked and encouraged innovation and collaboration. And that's what allowed us to get to the point where we were able to have the success we did at Montpelier and the subsequent success we had just recently with Marietta. I think it's really important to understand that even in the programming of this, what it allowed me to do, which is one of the biggest obstacles I've been trying to overcome since we've been here, is to obliterate this idea of silos that we had that exist within our division and even within our larger department. And it allowed us really to collaborate with different units, which again created this synergy, which created this absolutely fantastic product and deliverable. But also, it allowed us to really think about who our audience really is. I mean, I think we certainly serve and are proud to serve Prince George's County with distinction and leaning in with all the multiplicity of diversity that we have within the county. But we also understood that all national history is local history and all local history is national history. And the things that we talk about in our sites are relevant to people in different regions. And just the exponential explosion from talking about legacies of enslavement to legacies of colonization just demonstrated that. Like, we have no boundaries with our audiences. The only boundaries we have are ones that are self-imposed. And so now we don't have to self-impose those things anymore. We can talk about things in a national context, but still privilege the local because that's who we serve first and foremost without compromise. And I think this innovation and the technologies are just an example of that. And we have a great relationship with our public affairs and marketing department who has held us down. We have a great colleague in Ray Wallace who's been able to do tremendous work and allow us to think out of the box and get out of our comfort zone in terms of doing this work. And I think it's just going to continue to pay dividends in the future.
Thank you. Stephanie, did you want to add anything about these various transitions and how it impacted, what we did this year, just a couple weeks ago?
Well, I just want to follow up on what Omar was talking about when it comes to collaboration. I have to say, archaeology is interdisciplinary. I mean, by its very nature. And so I think that maybe that's part of why it's been a natural thing for us to be spearheading this in a way. I mean, archaeology, I mean, we're history, we're ethnography, we're geology, we're biology. I mean, we're all of these things. So, I mean, this collaborative approach, I think, was sort of a natural thing for our office, our discipline to spearhead. But I would also say that I think that is the key for any smaller museums or smaller organizations, that aren't, these big governmental organizations to keep in mind is that we have all of this within the commission, within our department. But, reaching out to the local archaeologist, the historian, the descendant, and so on, and bringing everyone to the table, I think is the way to have a successful program like this. And, and to keep it diverse, because of course, again, as Omar said, we have so many different historic sites. And so, every year it can be different based on where we are. But, even if you have one site, it can still be different every year. You can still have different conversations. You can still think about new ways and creatively, is it, like this year we had Jubilee Voices, the part of the Washington, DC Rebels, performing group. I mean, just waking us all up on the morning, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and, celebrating the lives that were lost, during that terrible day, but also, the lives of the enslaved there at Marietta. But we are keeping the archaeology in it every year, I'm telling you, one way or the other. So I don't know if I answered your question, Kristen.
That's perfect. I like ending it on that. I do want to bring in a couple of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat. I know, again, we are a local government entity. We do have, on occasion, internal support. On occasion, we may not have support. So can any of you speak to Marlena's question about any resistance that has appeared doing this work? And I was just gonna say, Mary, I know you can talk about this because we've had conversations. Or if there hasn't been tons of resistance, do we believe that is because of the fact we are a government entity? So Mary, take it away.
Well, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. What I'm going to tell you is one of the questions that I think we were going to talk about a little bit is what is the impact? And I think that the impact has been that it really has opened eyes. For when we had it at Montpelier, we had our deputy director be there one whole night. He stayed for the entire program. That had not happened before for us. So that to me was, we are opening eyes both internally because, as some of these historic sites, and one of us mentioned it earlier, is that we somehow are seen as you have to create some revenue. And, we're within this umbrella of basketball, and not that any of that is bad, but I think that for the first time I felt that they're there and they're seeing what impact we can make as historic sites. To me, it was critical in that in the past, despite the fact that I think that since 2010, we have been doing programming, exhibits, talks, you name it, what historic sites do, is specifically to address and to talk about enslavement and the enslaved, but we were not getting the eyes and the ears of upper management. And Echoes of the Enslaved did that. And I also think that also it was key that community members, African Americans that otherwise had not come to our sites, because once again, they didn't see themselves there. Although we were doing some of that programming, I think Echoes of the Enslaved showed them that, they are and they mean to do this work. So we're getting that participation. We have volunteers who are helping us with research, and we're utilizing their research for continuing to do this programming into the future. That has been great. I wouldn't say it wasn't so much resistance. It was more of not knowing what we're about and what we do. But now I totally think that they see us more. Stephanie, thank you. They really see what we are about, and that we can be places where, even though we're seen one way, but really now our historic sites can be about healing, that we can be places of greater educational engagement, places of dialogue and places for healing. And I think that now that our department, upper management sees that, I think we're gonna be receiving a little bit more support. They're gonna be more engaged. And also, I think the community, like I said, some of the volunteers that we have been working with now, they weren't working with us before, rightfully so, are with us now.
Stephanie, do you have anything you want to add related to, do you feel there was resistance? What impact has this had, negative, positive, and not only internally, but within the community? Like, what sort of reactions have you received, both positive and negative?
I have not received any negative feedback at all, with the exception of in year one, some people were upset that they didn't get more Jill McGill time. But can't that just be said for all of us? That's
well, a little bit. I think a little bit of negativity may have come actually through the Marietta program. Actually, I think there may have been some posts. I think that were actually Montpelier received one in connection to Marietta. From someone who descendant of the white side, the white family, they was asking us not to make their family look bad, and
really?
that
I didn't know about that. That was just recently.
Yes,
huh.
Yes, and also there was the comment that said, and you all have heard this comment, our audience too, that my white ancestors were not that bad enslavers, that they were kind of quote unquote kinder enslavers. And we received that because one of our staff members wanted to promote Echoes of the Enslaved at Marietta, and we use our constant contact to send it out and say, it's happening again, it's going to be at Marietta. But that was a concern. But we really have not received that much pushback. I'll be honest, we used to get the pushback probably I would say about 10 or so years ago. We were getting pushback from our friends volunteer group, but that has gradually diminished. And the key thing, of course, is that we have very supportive leadership. Omar Eaton Martinez is our key person to say, no, we're going to do this work, and this is why we're going to do it, and this is why it's important. So basically, we feel very supported in that sense. And if I get into any little trouble, I know who to call and who's going to come to my aid.
Stephanie, did you have anything else to add before move on to Omar and his thoughts related to resistance and, the fact we are a government entity? Does this change it for us when we do programming like this?
Yeah, I don't know if it makes a difference or not. To me, I think that if you're doing this work as a private institution, obviously there's different red tape than it is when you do it with a public institution. I don't want to be dismissive of that. I think the work is hard across the board because of the history that we have all inherited and sometimes without notice perpetuated in our own acts and behavior. But I think that's why we do the work. We want to disrupt all of that behavior. We don't want to lean into what's been happening in the past. We want to change that. We want to present the whole truth. We want to do it in a way where it's based on evidence, which again, it's one of the greatest things that we have the archaeology unit with us, because they allow us to do that with their great work. But for me, I mean, there's always going to be resistance in this type of work, and I believe that you have to be able to be courageous. You have to be courageous. You have to be transparent with the communities that you serve. We are going to continue to hear this type of response from our families who are descendants of slaveholders. And we have to, and I think a lot of the sessions that I've heard in this conference so far have been super uplifting to understand that people are already engaging with this and people have already had this aha moments. And I think we're the work that we're doing is going to provide some of the families that we work with in our unofficial network to have those moments as well. And some of our managers have already been doing that. And I've been part of some of these conversations directly or peripherally. And it's a lot. It's a lot. But I believe also we have to disrupt the idea that we are supposed to acquiesce and privilege a certain voice over another. To me, that is ridiculous. And to me, that is not why I do this work. I do this work so that we can hear from all aspects and understand the full context of what it is to see the humanity in one another. And these conversations have allowed us to do that. And as long as they continue to do that, I'm going to support it 1,000%.
And that perfectly segues into, yes, we are collaborating with Joe and the Slave Dwelling Project. And, our primary focus is on the legacy of enslavement. But as Omar said, and we've mentioned, we're bringing other voices into this. We're bringing in the voice of the indigenous, those first peoples. We're bringing in the voice of the Muslim community, and we're sort of expanding that. We're trying to bring a lot of different narratives into this because these are all different groups of people. Adversity abounds, right? So Stephanie, or Omar, Mary, just your thoughts on, and we have about 12 minutes left. Keep your questions coming in the chat. But what are your thoughts on the importance of expanding these conversations to these different groups? How, and we've been doing that. So what are your thoughts on the importance of doing that and spreading those words and voices?
I think in our very first panel in 2019, Dr. Jason Nichols brought this forward in a really poignant way. What he said was, white supremacy is malleable. It changes shapes, it changes forms. It's like energy, like you can't destroy energy, right? It just changes forms. And the reason why I bring up that point is because these other areas, these other topics that we engaged with in terms of colonization and anti-Muslim sentiment, they all exist because of that same white supremacist construct. And so there's an interconnectedness around this experience, around this type of resistance. We want to resist that construct, and so we want to talk about the truth and bring awareness to that through conversations based on historical evidences that we present at our sites. Dr. Hassan Jeffries, another speaker of this conference, in another conference that I participated in last week, brought up the idea of, white supremacy is a barrier to a multinational democracy, but a multinational democracy or multicultural democracy is a barrier to white supremacy. And so if we understand it that way, that we're all connected in this sort of rebuke or this fight against white dominant culture or whatever we think is the oppressor, that we understand that we're always going to be able to interweave these narratives together. And that's why I don't think it'll be any difficulty at all to come up with a way to expand this conversation for 22 and 23 and beyond, because this impacts so much.
Thank you. Stephanie, your thoughts on this?
No, I just, I'm so grateful for Omar's leadership in all of this. I mean, I think, he helped to push me a little bit out of where I probably would have gone with this otherwise. And maybe that gets back to the collaboration, I have to say that, just on a personal note, that the conversations and, that have started, that I've heard, in all 3 of these years at Echoes of the Enslaved have just been incredibly mind expanding. And, I have fundamentally changed the way I view the world. And I don't think I'm the only one. So yeah, I mean, for that, I'm grateful. And I really look forward to what he pushes me into next, I gotta say. Mary, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, well, of course. As a Latina, I can tell you that white supremacy doesn't literally, I'm going to use, doesn't discriminate against the colorism of a person. And it's, I was just, and I've known this, but with Hispanic Heritage Month, whose name is probably going to change in the future, with the Latinx community, is that there were laws that also kept Mexican Americans segregated and away from education. This goes across the board of any immigrant community that has come to this country. And so that is the commonality of these experiences. And so, yeah, we definitely can continue the conversation with any ethnic community of how white supremacy impacts our democracy consistently, and how it continues. And so that's why these conversations with the Slave Dwelling Project affect just everyone. When I participated at the Marietta Fire Circle, and I was with a group with and a lady shared her experience. And also you hear those personal stories, and it really touches you. And she shared how she did not understand, and how she didn't realize the trauma that her family, in particular her son, had suffered because she had been because she was involved in civil rights. Her house was bombed by the KKK. And I was sitting in that circle, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is she going through? And she did not know, that this, what it was, is that the trauma that her son has been suffering for all these years, and how scared he was as a child, how that has been affecting him all his life. And she didn't realize that until she was there sitting at that circle and talking about it. And that's how critical it is that we continue this.
And that's a powerful story, Mary, of what you experienced. And again, just sort of illustrates that important work that we keep trying to do, keep persevering to do. And as you can see, although we haven't had a lot of resistance, like this is something that is so important that we continue. And luckily, again, we have had the support of Omar and others higher up for this to help continue with this conversation and, bring this to the public and everything. And since we do have just a couple more minutes left, I do want to close this up and also see if anybody has any closing remarks that they want to make. But related to this important work, I know we've said a couple of these things. This one we did not. But throughout our Echoes of the Enslaved creation, we ourselves have come across a number of obstacles we have had to overcome. Our first year, a natural disaster, we had a hurricane that almost prevented Joe from coming. But he got here. We even had people that were tracking his flight and making sure he was getting there on time and would be there. The second year we had a pandemic. But again, through all of this, we're like, we're going to figure out a way to make this happen. We're going to do this.
And yes, and Joe still came.
Yes.
He got on that
Yes.
airplane and
Yes.
he came to Montpelier, and he slept there.
Yep.
By himself. He did not have company this time, but he continued his work.
Yes. And so I'd like to go around and just see if there's any closing remarks. Mary, would you like to kick us off with anything to end on for the audience?
Well, I would like to say thank you, of course, for coming to listen to us, and do reach out if you feel that we can be of assistance, even with words of wisdom, or you wanting to do the work. But if you are a little bit afraid, please reach out to us, and we can try and help out where we can. Like I said, at least showing you to resources, and perhaps methodology, perhaps how to, if you're a small site, I was thinking perhaps you can reach out to local African American businesses. They would like to be sponsors of the program, or similar type of program, and definitely reach out to the African American community around you, because they may be your biggest supporters.
Thank you, Mary. Omar, I'd like to go to you next for any closing remarks or comments.
Sure. I'll simply say empathy and humility goes a long way. If you can just remember that, as leaders, all of you are leaders in your community in one form or another. Whether you're at the top of your organization, you're in the middle, or even just entry level, everybody's managing up and managing out. And it takes someone who can demonstrate empathy and humility. We don't need know-it-alls in leadership. We need people who can humble themselves and work with the community.
Thank you. Fantastic words. And Stephanie, I'd like you to round this out. You are the person that created this vision, had this concept, and I'd like to bring it full circle and have you close this out.
Well, I don't know what I can say that hasn't already been said. I mean, honestly, it's Echoes of the Enslaved is it's a wonderful collaboration. And I think all of us who have worked with big teams before know that there are a lot of challenges that come with, collaborative projects, but the payoffs are almost always worth it. And, just having so many different voices, and opinions and thoughts, to help to create and pull off projects like this has been really fundamental. And it's just been such an honor for me, like I said, on a personal note, as an archaeologist, in my little corner here in this, huge park system, I've, gotten to work with just some amazing people. And I feel like the groundwork that we've laid is going to extend well beyond this. It extends well beyond Echoes of the Enslaved, and it even goes beyond our park system. So, as Mary talked about, bringing in new members of the community, people who might not have come otherwise or might not have been engaged otherwise. This has been just a really wonderful opportunity. So thank you to everyone. And thank you to all of you for sitting here with us. And, please get in touch. We would, as Mary said, we would love to talk with you about our project. And we'd love to invite you to Echoes of the Enslaved 2022, wherever it may be. But we're having it one way or the other. So probably next fall. So, keep checking our social. We're pretty, we post a lot on our PG Parks History Facebook page. That's the best place to see what we're doing. All of our historic sites post there regularly. But we also have, a pretty robust web presence, working on that a little bit. Yeah, please reach out. Thank you. And thank you to Kristen, our moderator.
Welcome. Thank you, everybody. Yes, reach out for questions.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.